I've put in extended time with the Xtrfy M8 as I've been using it for a month and I've been pleasantly surprised. Let's start with the features of the mouse, which are actually most really good. For example, the mouse feet are now better than in any other Xtrfy mouse previously. There are two large feet and they feel very good with pretty much any mouse pad. So if your mouse pad is rough like the Artisan high-end that I have here, the glide is still very good and somewhat smooth, not too rough like it can be if you have smaller feet on the mouse. And with smoother and slower mouse pads, the glide is still good and not muddy by any means. The main mouse buttons on the mouse have the KLG M8.0s and the actuation is somewhat requires quite a medium amount of force. These are not super light but not heavy. The clicks are quite consistent, so it does not really matter where you click the mouse from, so whether you click it from the front, the middle or quite further back, they still feel somewhat medium in terms of heaviness. The side buttons are quite tactile and snappy. There is some post travel when you really use a lot of force to actuate them, but this does not happen in real use. A minimal amount of pre-travel, not really nothing that you would notice in-game. Overall, these feel very good and, for example, much better than the G Pro X Superlight side buttons. The mouse feels very lightweight at about 56 grams and the weight is also well balanced all around the mouse, not as well as with the Superlight, which basically feels very lightweight for its size. But this is impressive for a small mouse and I think it feels better than many small mice in terms of how the weight is balanced. In the bottom of the mouse there is a switch which you can slide to configure some of the settings on the mouse. So you can control CPI, then you can control the polling rate and the debounce time. Let's discuss the details of the shape of the Xtrfy M8 a little bit. The M8 can remind you quite a bit of the Superlight. These both are very rounded shapes and they do not have much curvature on the sides, so these are quite safe shapes. The thing about the M8 is that it is quite a bit smaller than the Superlight and in hand you can definitely feel this. It's thinner and shorter, but it is similar in how high profile it is. The main mouse buttons of course quite aggressively slope down to the front, but this does not give me any discomfort at least, so I can hold my fingers quite far back and the clicks still feel good for me, or I can rest my palm on top of the mouse in the front and still good click feeling for me. It's very suitable for a claw grip no matter what size your hands are, but as there is very limited space on the front right corner of the mouse because of the button design, larger and longer hands will of course have to curl their fingers a lot more when they claw. Because of how thin the mouse is, I actually curl my pinky and my ring finger quite naturally with it, so clawing the mouse this way feels very comfortable and natural. The only thing I would say is that reaching the back side button can require a bit of work from me as I'm more under the front side button with my thumb. One thing to note here though is that my fingers on the triggers are not that far forward and therefore not extremely low profile. So the height from where my fingers are is about 1.1 centimeters. And as an example, with the MC1 and how much curvature there is on the buttons, the height profile is 1.1 centimeters as well. There is that slight difference, and with the MC1 that's pretty much the lowest you can go, so you can just move your fingers a little bit more forward and get a lower profile. For fingertip grip I think the mouse feels very natural as well after using it quite a bit for that, but the only issue for me is that the coating or the surface finish of the M8 is quite slippery, so fingertip grip is not optimal for me with this mouse. I wouldn't consider this mouse very good for palm grip, but if you have short hands you can pull off very relaxed kind of claws at least, but you're most likely still going to have to curl your fingers on the right side. The design on the right side is actually very good, so the mouse feels very flat from the middle, but from the front the mouse is a little bit thinner from the bottom as it is from the top, which means that it's very easy to lift the mouse and you can feel this with your fingers and it feels very comfortable and it's easy to catch this sort of consistent position with the mouse when you grip it. I actually would wish that the Superlight would have a similar design on the front right corner as this does. Let's go and discuss a few things that felt actually very natural and good for me in game. I very quickly noticed that because of the low profile, even when I'm not holding my fingers here, and because of how thin the mouse is, it's very easy for me to do these constant micro adjustments. So for example in Warzone I press the mouse 2 and mouse 1 button, so I'm ADS'd in, I'm shooting, and then I'm tracking a target and controlling the recoil at the same time. That just feels very natural, very good and very precise for me. Especially when those adjustments have to be very small, so the target is barely moving or moving very slowly, or very far away and the target is small. For comparison, with the Deathadder V3 Pro, my flicks are very accurate and my sort of short range tracking is very good when the target is moving fast. So basically I have to move my mouse much more when I'm tracking. But I do notice that off the top of my head, or when I basically start using the mouse, I do have some struggles making those very minor adjustments when the targets are small. But then again, on the flip side, I'm definitely not as accurate with my quick flicks on the M8. And even that short range tracking when the target is moving fast and all over the screen. That being said, this is all on short term, so after using this maybe about a week or even less, so using this mouse for longer and getting more used to it, I've gotten better with that short range high velocity tracking as well. Let's get into performance and start with click latency. So what I'm measuring is the latency between you actuating your mouse switch and your OS or operating system receiving that input and registering it. So the latency for the Xtrfy M8 is 4.95 milliseconds, which is 1 millisecond worse than with the other 3395 and Comp X mice such as the Pulsar X2 and Fanatec Aria. But we have to take into account the fact that the lowest debound setting for Xtrfy is 2 milliseconds and for Pulsar it is 0 milliseconds. So that's where the difference is coming from. It's not that Xtrfy has worse implementation, it's just their choice. These mice that are using a Comp X MCU have also struggled with the idle delay issues, but Xtrfy has solved that and the M8 has no idle delay whatsoever. Moving to motion latency, and the Xtrfy M8 performs pretty much exactly the same as the Lamso Atlantis, and both have motion sync enabled. So it's a very good implementation, quite close to the Logitech G Pro X Superlight, and I found no issues with polling stability or anything sensor related. The battery life on the mouse is good, but it's not comparable to the previous Xtrfy mice, so for example the M42 and the M4. Those had a larger battery, and as long as you disabled the RGB, the battery life was quite insane with them. Now with the Xtrfy M8, the battery is the same size as with the Pulsar X2, so the battery life should be very similar. To conclude this whole review, for 99 bucks or euros, I would definitely say that the bang for buck is there with the Xtrfy M8. We should also consider the fact that at least here in Europe you can get these Xtrfy mice from many different retailers and most do not have any shipping costs whatsoever. So here we can get the Xtrfy M8 for cheaper than we can with the Pulsar X2, and the Lamso Atlantis, for example, for some reason is 120 euros here, which is 20 euros more than the M8. So definitely good value for money when we consider the competition. Overall, there are very few things that I can complain about the Xtrfy M8. In the 5 weeks that I've used it for now, I've opened it twice, I put it back together, the clicks feel pretty much the exact same as they used to do when I got the mouse. There is no more pre-travel or post-travel on the side buttons, pretty much no flex, there is ever so slight when I really press the mouse quite a lot, but no creaking whatsoever, which is a positive note. One thing I'd like to see is a more premium feeling coding, so the mouse would be more grippy and more premium feeling overall in the hand. For me, the M8 is one of the best releases of the year, and it's definitely one of the most exciting releases of the year. I'm really happy with the fact that Xtrfy are brave enough to try something new as they did with this low profile front. That's it from me, have a good day and see you in my next in-depth review.